June 1462. The Ottoman army marches into an abandoned Wallachian capital and stops. Ahead of them, a forest, not of trees. 20,000 stakes planted in rows, each one holding a body. Soldiers who had crossed half a continent and never lost a battle turn around. They retreat from a dead man's message. You know the name of the man who did this, or you think you do. Forget the cape, forget the fangs, forget the castle in the fog. The real Dracula never turned into a bat, never drank a drop of blood, and never once needed to bite anyone to become the most feared man in Europe. His real name was Vlad III, and to understand what he actually did, and why the fear he created is still with us 4 centuries later, we have to go back to a small country wedged between 2 empires that both wanted it dead. His father, Vlad II, joined a knightly brotherhood sworn to hold the Christian line against the Ottomans, the Order of the Dragon. For that, people started calling him Dracul, the dragon. His son's name, Dracula, simply meant son of the dragon. Not a monster yet, a hostage. As a boy, Vlad and his younger brother Radu were handed over to the Ottoman court, collateral to keep their father in line. 2 boys, raised inside the empire their own country was fighting to survive. It sent them in 2 different directions. Radu grew comfortable there. Years later, the Ottomans would put him on Vlad's own throne. Vlad grew something else, a permanent, ice-cold grudge. Back home, his father and older brother were murdered by the very nobles, the boyars, who were supposed to serve them. When Vlad finally took the throne for real in 1456, he didn't forgive. He made a list. According to tradition, on Easter Sunday itself, he invited the boyar families he blamed to a feast, then marched the survivors, still in their finest clothes, on a forced walk into the mountains. Their destination, a crumbling old fortress on a cliff. Their new job, rebuild it, with their own hands, until it killed them. That fortress still stands. It's called Poenari. Not the postcard castle tourists visit today, the real one. Poenari was mercy compared to what came next. Vlad's signature was a single method of execution used on enemies, rivals, and his own people alike. Impalement. Slow, public, visible for miles. One story, told again and again. Foreign envoys refused to remove their turbans in his presence, citing their own custom. Vlad had the turbans nailed to their heads. The message, presumably, that custom was never slipping again. Here's the twist nobody puts on the movie poster. The goriest stories about Vlad don't come from his victims. They come from his enemies' printing presses. This woodcut, printed in Nuremberg in 1499, became the image of Vlad for the next 5 centuries, dining calmly among a forest of the impaled. It came from Saxon merchant cities, Brasov, Sibiu, places Vlad had been raiding and taxing into ruin over a trade war. Their printing presses turned him into Europe's first viral monster. Some of the earliest mass-printed propaganda in history, and it worked exactly as intended. By 1463, a German poet named Michael Beheim was performing a horror poem about Vlad at the imperial court itself, based, he claimed, on a conversation with a monk who'd escaped Vlad's prison. True or not, it was excellent theater. But there's another set of sources, quieter, less printed, easy to miss. Papal envoys and Venetian diplomats describing the very same man very differently. The last serious wall standing between the Ottoman advance and the rest of Christian Europe. Same war criminal, same national hero. Depends entirely on whose trade routes he'd just burned down. Which brings us back to that forest. In June 1462, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II marched into Wallachia with an army built to end it for good. Vlad had a different plan. He struck first, at night, inside their own camp, in stolen Ottoman uniforms. The raid missed the Sultan's own tent by rows. It tore apart his viziers instead. Mehmed survived, his nerve less so. Days later, Mehmed's army finally reached the capital. and walk straight into that forest from the beginning of this video. As many as 20,000 stakes by one chronicler's count. Probably fewer, but by then, nobody in that army was in the mood to count. Mehmed the Conqueror, a man who would go on to take Constantinople, dug a trench around his own camp that night and marched home the next morning. Vlad never won a war, he won a retreat. Sometimes that's the same thing. It didn't save him for long. Vlad lost his throne, won it back once more, and died in battle in the winter of 1476, ambushed by most accounts, and beheaded. His head was sent to Constantinople, preserved in honey, and put on display. This is the closest thing we have to his real face, a copy of a portrait painted after his death, of a copy that no longer survives. And that famous Dracula's castle tourists visit today, perched dramatically in the fog, Vlad probably never even set foot inside it. Wrong castle, right country, wrong postcard. Now jump forward 400 years to a theater manager in London named Bram Stoker, writing a gothic novel and hunting for an exotic name for his vampire. He found Dracula printed in a library book, 2 pages, no impalement, barely a paragraph of actual history. That's it. That's the whole research trip. The vampire part, the fangs, the coffin, the thirst for blood, Stoker built almost entirely from decades of earlier Gothic fiction and scattered Eastern European folklore. Vlad supplied exactly one thing, a name that sounded suitably foreign and terrifying. In the hundreds of pages of Stoker's own surviving notes, Vlad the Impaler is never mentioned once. Not the stakes, not the forest, not any of it. The bat, the fangs, the hypnotic stare, the castle in the fog. 100% fiction, and mildly insulting to the real man who never once needed to seduce anyone. He'd have found the cape frankly excessive. So there isn't one Dracula. There are 2. A 15th century warlord, half true, built by his own enemies' printing presses, and a 19th century vampire, built almost entirely out of nothing, wearing his name like a rented coat. Next time you see fangs and a cape on a screen, remember the version that's actually true. He never needed to bite anyone, he just needed a forest and 20,000 reasons to turn an empire around. That's a monster who never had to pretend.